So, based on my previous experiences with this age group, being early childhood, I would say that the observations that I made in this particular scenario were quite typical of what you'd expect from young children. And it was interesting for me having a relationship with these children previously, the 5-year-old being my niece, and then the 3 and the 3.5-year-old both being my nephews, to kind of just think about what their typical behavior was and then note any differences to see if I could relate some of the differences that I saw to some of the material that I have been learning about. So the overall conclusion that I drew was that these children were very well behaved. So Erickson's third stage, the initiative versus guilt stage, was on display particularly well in my observations, and particularly in the emotional regulation area. So the child's actions during the observation were evidence that their parents, quite frankly, did a good job of steering them towards the initiative category, as they were mainly well behaved and were able to manage their emotions quite well. However, there was one instance in which the 3.5-year-old, being unhappy that the 5-year-old was playing with a toy the wrong way, um, ended up hitting the 5-year-old, and that elicited a timeout from the parents. And so that was one instance in which poor emotional regulation was shown. But in general, they were all very helpful. They were all playing very well together. There was evidence of both onlooker play as well as interactive play and sociodramatic play as well. Um, and when it was time for the children to finish play and go to the table and eat, they listened quite well to their parents. And now, then that wasn't something that was continual throughout the whole entire observation. There were a couple of times where it took the parents, telling them 2 or 3 times to, not play a certain way or to be more generous and helpful to the other children. But for the most part, the children were behaving well. And overall, I thought that these children were displaying typical behavior, and I learned that in most situations when the children in this particular case were acting up or were disrupting the other children's play, um, the reaction was not too severe. And when a child had a wrong done against them was when the reactivity was shown in full effect. But it was really interesting just to look at these children through a psychological lens when previously I hadn't been able to do that. And I noticed that, you can kind of relate a lot of their behaviors to um, psychological kind of developmental stages and some of the, key terms that we were learning about in the text.